Hi, beautiful people. How are ya? I'm Dr. Pammie Jean. I hope you're having a great day. Fibromyalgia has existed for centuries. We know more about it today than in prior years. It's no longer a disease exclusive to women. Men get it too, and so do children, unfortunately. We have treatments today that somewhat work. At least the treatments are better than yesteryears. But we don't know how people get fibromyalgia. Not really, but we're getting closer. Today, I want to discuss one particular study. It's a German doctoral thesis from 2024 called The Fibromyalgia Syndrome as an Autoimmune Disorder, Detection of Antineuronal Autoantibodies in Fibromyalgia Syndrome. Antineuronal autoantibodies were discovered in fibromyalgia syndrome. This could be the link we've been waiting for as researchers put it all together. This same researcher also was part of a study in 2025 with other researchers that was related to the dorsal root ganglion. We've talked about that quite a bit, and IgG autoantibodies, which that famous 2021 study spoke about, meaning autoantibodies could be part of fibromyalgia pathology, and explain why autoantibodies are present without physical damage to the body. So today, let's take a look at this 2024 study. Things are happening. Here we go. Researchers around the world are searching for autoantibody clues that link fibromyalgia to an autoimmune disorder. About 2 to 8% of the general population around the world have fibromyalgia. More women than men are diagnosed still today. Chronic widespread pain is associated with a range of other symptoms, including sleep difficulties, fatigue, cognitive disturbances, stiffness, depression, and many others. There's a strong genetic link with markers such as 5-HT2A, dopamine D4, and catecholamine O-methyl. About 21% of patients cannot identify a trigger for their fibromyalgia. 73% attributed fibro to an emotional trauma or a chronic disease. About 26.7% of patients suffered with an acute illness prior to fibromyalgia. And less common were surgery, motor vehicle accidents associated with cervical trauma, and other injuries. And even more perplexing is that patients with fibro were found to have infections, in particular viruses such as hepatitis C, human immunodeficiency virus, or HIV, Coxsackie B, and parvovirus, but also bacteria like Borrelia preceding fibro. In the case of Lyme disease and HIV infections, an obvious overlap of clinical symptoms was noticed. It is also known that overlapping conditions related to central sensitivity abound in fibromyalgia, such as IBS at 41%, TMJ at 24%, headaches at 26%, interstitial cystitis at 15%, chronic fatigue syndrome at 55%, vulvar vestibular syndrome at 23%, and Gulf War syndrome at 18%. Additionally, patients may also have other diseases causing pain, such as RA at 15%, SLE, a type of lupus, at 15%, ankylosing spondylitis at 30%, hypothyroidism at 34%, diabetes mellitus at 18%, Crohn's disease at 26%, and osteoarthritis at 11%, endometriosis 6%, and ulcerative colitis at 11%. You're getting the picture, I'm sure. Studies have failed to show an effective specific therapy to treat fibromyalgia. Treatments are directed towards reduction of symptoms, and for the control of symptoms, a long-term medication treatment is commonly a rule, but remission is not guaranteed. Remission is rare and often transitory or not permanent. Treatments often need to be changed throughout our lifetime. The younger the patient, the better the flow of the disease. Drug treatment only decreases symptoms by about 28 to 40%. For most of us with fibromyalgia, our management most likely began with medication to relieve some of the pain and help with sleep. These might be duloxetine, pregabalin, tramadol, low-dose amitriptyline, or cyclobenzaprine. Because of the opioid epidemic, many physicians don't prescribe them for fibro. Sleep medication or muscle relaxers are common. Physical therapy is often needed to relieve stiff muscles, and mindfulness or meditation techniques are needed for anxiety and pain. But studies show that even a combination of treatments has many gaps. In most cases, treatments are short-term. This sounds so discouraging, doesn't it? But let's press on. I truly do have a point. Fibro patients experience abnormal pain sensitivity to a wide array of stimuli such as heat, cold, or mechanical and ischemic pressure. We have deficient ascending pathways of specific neurons and neurotransmitters in the blood and cerebrospinal fluid. We have neuroinflammation related to the release of inflammatory peptides, such as glutamate and cytokines from C fibers into the skin. There's no physical test to diagnose fibro. There are clinical features that are needed for diagnosis, but no test. Now what? There are suggestions by some researchers that fibro is a disorder of the autoimmune system. Fibro has been described as a neuropathy-induced autoimmunity, which is directed against nervous tissue. Consider the predominance of autoimmunity in females. An autoimmune disease is a condition in which the immune system attacks its own tissue of the body by mistake. A detectable number of autoantibodies or autoreactive T cells in amounts higher than healthy people must be present. Let's say that again. An autoimmune disease is a condition in which the immune system attacks its own tissue of the body by mistake. A detectable number of autoantibodies or autoreactive T cells in amounts higher than healthy people must be present. A clinical picture of the autoantibodies must be explained. The autoantibodies must be explained. They can't be there for no reason. The dorsal root ganglia outside of the spinal cord and part of the periphery are made up of cell bodies and glia. Dorsal root ganglia house cell bodies of sensory neurons. The dorsal root ganglia is of special note to researchers when looking at fibromyalgia and has been found to impact fibro. Ion channels, NaV 1.7, calcium channels, and TRPV1 are important potential markers in fibro, among others. So, the researcher, Anastasia Barsic, I'm assuming that's how you pronounce that, of this 2024 study, was determined to find autoantibodies in fibro patients. About 50% of fibro patients have small fiber pathology, similar to small fiber neuropathy. And about 40% of small fiber neuropathy patients report widespread chronic pain, similar to fibro. Fibroblasts also play a part. This researcher aimed to detect autoantibodies acting against the dorsal root ganglia tissue in fibrosera, the blood, and found a robust presence of autoantibodies to different dorsal root ganglia components. What's interesting is that the results imply that autoantibodies play a protective role rather than a nociceptive role. But further studies are needed. About 36% of patients had autoantibodies. I have puppies coming in and out down here and bringing their food in here and chomping back here, if you hear that too. Rat dorsal root ganglia were used. It's interesting that seropositive, those with autoantibodies, showed less pain than those who were seronegative. This seems to make sense to me because we don't show autoimmunity in any sense of the imagination in a traditional way. So in this study, if the patient had autoantibodies, they'd have less pain than the patients without autoantibodies. I'm sure that wasn't what this researcher expected to find. I wouldn't, but it makes sense because they can't find autoantibodies in all patients. So if you have high pain, you're not getting the protective feature of the dorsal root ganglia autoantibodies. The low pain patients are getting. The lower pain intensity was related to the nuclear binding pattern at the level of large neurons. These autoantibodies appear to have been protective and not destructive. Yeah, there was no relationship to other symptoms, such as fatigue, waking unrefreshed, or cognitive symptoms. But anxiety was high in the seronegative patients, those who weren't getting a protective feature and had high pain. Again, that makes sense. No autoantibodies means more pain, which is more anxiety caused by pain. Seronegative, no autoantibodies equals more pain, and seropositive with autoantibodies equals less pain. This researcher can't propose that those of us with autoantibodies are any different from those without autoantibodies. At present, we all have fibromyalgia. But with more research in this area, these findings could contribute to the pathophysiology of fibro, how a disease develops. It's really interesting. I wonder if this is something over time that develops. I don't see the length of time for patients, so that would be interesting to determine and may not make a difference, but interesting anyways. When I used to get tests by a rheumatologist often, I never showed any kind of autoantibody except for the ANA, which is an autoantibody. And it would come and go, wax and wane. One time I'd have it, 2 times I wouldn't, then the next time I'd have. But anything else, no. What about you? Do you show autoantibodies of some sort, but don't have a particular disease to back it up? Just something to think about. So I hope you learned something. I send you gentle hugs and support. Love you.